Okay, so here we are. Um, Connie Miller, hello, for the first time, I believe, yes.
Hello.
And where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from University Place, which is a suburb of Tacoma, Washington.
Oh, Tacoma, Washington. Wow, okay.
Yeah.
University Place, I thought you were going to say Maryland, but there's a few.
I thought you were going to say the East
Manhattan.
Village because it's right here in Manhattan. Yeah. I was like, oh,
Oh,
we're right. We're neighbors. Yeah.
in a way we are.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, this is the
Okay,
second one or second one I've been at. I
Oh,
think I was your first one, maybe, or the second one.
Wonderful.
you attended the previous class?
I think one or two of them. At least I know I watched a recording of one. And I was at one of the early ones in this series.
Okay, you must have kept yourself off the screen, though.
No,
Okay, I'm pretty certain I've
maybe
talked
I
to you before, but
maybe I did. I don't recall.
okay, no worries. Okay, let me again without Joel, not that it's a problem really, but I just need to reorient myself a little bit. Like I've got a document
Mm.
I'll be looking for. Oh, here's the document. Okay, so thanks for everybody for showing up. And what I often do in the beginning of classes that I teach, whether they're in person or now that I'm starting these up on Zoom again, is I usually read some form of poetry. And I do that to help people, as I call it, really get into the room, into the class, and to give them an opportunity to use their mind, chances are somewhat differently than they were using their minds just prior to the class taking place. Um, because I think that's important. I think, particularly when we're talking about coaching, it can be quite necessary to get someone to be slowed down, or maybe they start talking about something about themselves and they're immediately upset because they're upset with themselves and such. So we're looking to people to be calm
Mm.
and appreciative of themselves. So, so what I'm going to start with today is some quotes, which is not the way I normally do it. But for me, um, I'm doing, I'm involved in something that I'm calling Seishindo, and I consider that to be a wisdom school. Maybe I'll mention something about that later on. And a really crucial part of NLP for me has been Gregory Bateson. So I'm going to give some quotes from Gregory Bateson and also a few from Milton Erickson. And everyone will say, oh, yeah, of course, Milton. But Gregory Bateson, Judy Deloja, John Grinder, um, and Richard Bandler, they did a lot of talking with him back in Santa Cruz, back must be 50 years ago. And in fact, Bateson was the one that introduced them to Milton Erickson.
Mm.
And he actually said, or so I've been told, could just be a rumor, that he was actually sad that he did that, that he introduced them to Milton Erickson, because he said he would have liked to have seen things travel in a little bit different direction. But anyway, here we are. Um, Milton said, a goal without a date is just a dream. Milton also said, don't ask why the patient is the way he is. Ask instead what would lead him to change. And another way to say this could be, What specifically will she or he need to do to generate change? Generate change. Here's a little quote by Charlie, if you don't mind if I put my name into the mix here. And I just wrote this as part of my process a few days ago, actually. And I love to take 5 or 6 packages of different flower seeds and mix them all together. And then I sprinkle the seeds in a wide area, not knowing which seed is where. And I found it really makes it very exciting when these seeds start to sprout, and you can finally, after a couple of weeks, you can finally tell what kind of flower is actually sprouting up in my little garden. And it makes the whole process, for me anyway, very magical. Like the birth of many children of different ethnicities, and you realize that each flower is perfect and beautiful and different than the others. I sometimes say, I don't want only chamomile blooming in my garden because the dragon flower will enhance the beauty of the chamomile. Milton said, you can't change your past, but you can indeed change your reaction to the past. Gregory said, Gregory Bateson, I hope you don't mind if I feel like I'm on a first name basis with Gregory. Gregory said, what is the pattern that connects the crab to the lobster and the primrose to the orchid, and all of them to me and me to you? Next, Gregory says, allow yourself to see what you don't allow yourself to see. Gregory said, enlightenment is always preceded by confusion. That happens to be one of my favorites. Enlightenment is always preceded by confusion. Gregory says next, life will bring you pain without needing your help. Your responsibility is to create joy. Gregory says, there are times when I catch myself believing that there is such a thing as something which is separate from something else. It takes two to know one. Yes, metaphor, that's how the whole fabric of mental interconnection holds together. Metaphor is right at the bottom of being alive. And wisdom is the intelligence of the system as a whole. And we can never be quite clear whether we are referring to the world as it is or the world as we see it. Everything you believe in, everything you've experienced is fully dependent on the previous experience, your previous experience, and what you believe in. We experience the world as we believe it to be, not as it really is. Every move we make in fear of a specific tragedy, in fact, hastens it. And the last statement by Gregory for today, science, like art, religion, commerce, warfare, and even sleep, is based on presuppositions. So, I heard a bit of umming and ahhing. Who would like to make a comment, any comments at all about any of the statements I just made?
I'll say something, Charlie. Yeah, I loved what stuck out for me tonight was pain is inevitable, and then we have to choose joy. So it's like
Okay.
almost like conscious effort, and that's something that's going to stick with me. And all of them were fabulous, but that one stuck with me.
Okay.
Get stuck in the past so much, also what Milton said, but
Yeah.
to acknowledge that pain is inevitable, and but we can create joy. That's a choice.
Yes. Well,
No matter what's going on, we have to really find joy.
what I've heard said a number of times before, I forget who said it first, because I've been knocking around for a long time, but pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Suffering is optional, the way I've heard it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I've heard it said that.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, one of the
And
most,
I can get, I mean, I try not to get stuck in it because I have a little bit of history like you with all the cancer stuff and, all the, I don't want to get stuck in that. I want to, and I have been better because like you, the last few scans have been good. So, but for a while there, I was in this little maze of it back, coming back, coming back. And I got stuck in this like fear of, you know, I felt like a hamster in a hamster wheel, like going around and around. But now I'm in a better state, but I'm making better choices because I am in a better state because have lightened up for me.
yes. And
And I want to stay with that. I want to stay with that positive flow
yeah, great, great.
and
And
not get stuck in the past with that because it's not going to change anything. I just got to let that go. But
yes,
sometimes it's hard for me when I'm getting closer to the scan time. Then I get a little frightened, but I think that's normal.
yeah. Well, you know what, Ginny, whether it's quote unquote normal or not, it's pretty prevalent.
Mm.
And so, as I say often, I was a very serious student of Aikido for a number of years. That's why I moved to Japan. And my main teacher, Tohei Sensei, used to love to say to people, what you think is natural or normal is not at all natural or normal. So, for instance, if I was to make a loud noise now, which I'm not going to do, but I'll make a little noise, and you went and tensed up your muscles, you might say, "Oh, that's normal. That's what people do when you make a loud noise." But one of the trainings we had in Aikido was not to tense your muscles up within reason, regardless of what's taking place. Tensing your muscles up is an overreaction. And you can really notice, in my way of considering, people's recovering still from trauma, is they're having an overreaction. Something big happened in the past. When I say big, they might have been beaten up. They might have been in a war somewhere. They might have been, anyway, something horrible. And then their system, in an attempt to protect itself, is really on the lookout for something like that happening again.
I lived like that for 6 years, and I stopped working, and I stopped doing everything. I was in like a stuck state, and I
Yes.
stopped. I said, I can't work. I can't do this. I can't. Everything was. But now I'm finally be able to breathe and to move forward because
Yeah.
I've learned a lot from it. I've learned a lot. Anyhow, that's
Yeah.
it.
And
And I love what you just said because it felt like that all those years I was in that tightness and it was so unhealthy for me.
Okay,
mentally,
yeah.
spiritually, and physically. But now I try not to do that to myself.
Yes. So, I often say to give, well, I mean, I want people to know who I really am or who I've been. I mean, I'm kind of both who I've been and who I am now. And so I was what's called a high functioning alcoholic for many years and successful in business, worked about 60 hours a week for a long time. And when I was still in New York City, and drank about a half bottle of whiskey, I don't know, 5 or 6 nights a week, but good at work, creative, on target. And so it's called self-medicating, we know now, you know. And so the thing is, and I think I was reading something about this recently in one of our classes, from a man who had given up drinking a few years ago, and I've given up. I mean, I have a glass of wine or something occasionally, but I'm done with all of that. So this gentleman said, for years, I thought I had a problem with alcohol. And this is where, as a coach, you need to be, or a therapist, you need to be very careful. And all of the people I went to for help, before I could even say it, they said, "Oh, Fred, you've got a problem with alcohol." And he said, so I really believed that. That seemed to be the general way of thinking. But somehow I finally talked myself into stopping. And what I realized is it wasn't alcohol I had a problem with. I had a problem with my lack of self-respect and appreciation.
Mm.
And no longer drinking gave me the opportunity to understand that for the first time in my life. So I didn't have a problem with alcohol. I had a problem with the negatively oriented way I thought about myself. And when I was thinking in that way, alcohol was a way of medicating myself out of those feelings. And, I have I'll say a friend more than a client recently here in Chiang Rai. And he had a back injury about 3 years ago. And the doctor gave him some kind of fairly strong painkiller. And I don't know which medication it is, but anyway, it's a powerful painkiller. And he saw me socially about 2 months ago, and he was like barely able to walk. And I just always use the name Fred, so I don't, make it obvious who I'm talking about, even though you've never met this gentleman. And I said, Fred, and I put my hand on his lower back, and he jumped as if I had hit him with a hammer or something. Oh, don't touch me. And by the way, this can't be helped. And he really went off. My experience, and I didn't say it to him because he didn't ask me for my input, and I'm usually very careful about not giving my input when no one asks for it. He's addicted to whatever pain medication he's taking.
It's like heroin.
And he very, very much, the last thing he would want to happen is that his damn back would become okay and he wouldn't need the pain medication anymore. So don't touch me, don't go near me, this can't be helped. I know fully it's my body, I know it can't be helped. And I said, okay, there you go. And we really, whether we're coaches or just everyday human beings, we really need to be able to let it go when people aren't ready to be helped.
Yes.
And again, pain will there'll be some pain in everyone's life. Suffering is optional.
Mm.
But sometimes, and we can often ask ourselves this question and get some really interesting answers, sometimes we're doing things that are not in our best self-interest because we're getting some kind of benefit from that.
Mhm. Yes.
But we think
yes.
it's the solution, like
Yeah,
the
thank you
booze.
for that. Right, right.
Wasn't the
And
problem,
I
you thought it
found
was
it
the solution.
Yes.
right. And I found that I said, I just had to get out of that box. Yeah. And I feel much better. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think it really has helped my health because of my mindset. It really
Yes.
has.
Yes. Yes. And one of the things I like to say to people is be careful, please, when you use the term it.
Mm.
It has not been in my self-interest. I am not acting in my best self-interest when I do X.
Right.
It changing the way you language things like that, all of us, me too, often, changing the way you language these situations will really be able to positively impact the results you get in your life going forward. In NLP, what do we call it? Oh yes, I got it. My mind was searching there for a moment. We need to be careful about nominalizing quote unquote things.
Mm.
And I call nominalization turning a
Yeah.
verb into a noun.
Mm.
That's not the normal NLP way to say it. How would you define nominalization, Rob?
Just like that.
Just like that.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's when you take a process and turn it into a thing. So
Mm.
relating becomes a relationship,
Yes,
Mm.
yes.
right?
Marriage.
And they often say, if you can't put it in a wheelbarrow, then it's probably a nominalization.
Yes, there you go. That's boy, I haven't heard that in a long time, but yes,
Yeah.
I remember that, and I agree with that. And for instance, sometimes if I start out with a man as a client, and
Named Fred,
Fred, Fred, of course, needless to say,
catching
and
on.
and he says, my wife is really driving me crazy. And I say, okay, let's just slow down. And of course, I don't know your wife, and your wife isn't coming for sessions with me, and there's a good chance she'll never come for sessions with me because she doesn't even know me. But let me just suggest how you might want to say differently what you just said. Okay, go ahead. I'm driving myself crazy in my relationship with my wife. And you know what? If this guy is really stuck and I give him that suggestion, he goes, "Oh my God, now you're just like my wife. You're gonna step on top of everything I say and try to make it and tell me it's not perfect." I go, "Whoa, okay, let's back up." So it's also called being self-responsible. Because I don't know, maybe if you live in New York City, your wife might also own a gun, and she might be putting it to your head and forcing you to act in a certain way. But if she's not, your wife isn't making you feel or think or say anything.
Mm.
It's important to realize that you're doing that on your own.
Mm.
Okay, anyone else here, Brenda or?
Yeah, I just would touch on the one of confusion precedes enlightenment. I think it precedes any learning.
Well,
Uh,
I want to thank you for saying that because I thought that was only me. And, you know, like I lived in Japan for 30 years and my Japanese is reasonable, but I'd also be embarrassed, if there was a Japanese person on this call and he started talking to me in Japanese because my grammar is not what it should be. And now that I'm living in Thailand, it's a kind of contest, I could call it, which is better, my Thai or my Japanese, but I like to prefer to say what's a little more honest, which is worse, my Japanese, my Thai. And one of the things that happens, like every once in a while, I meet a Japanese person here, and for some reason, the most challenging thing for me is to be able to speak numbers. Now, my Japanese is good enough to where I can say numbers without needing to think, just like I can in English. But when I'm talking to a Japanese person here in Japanese, and I haven't spoken Japanese in 10 years, or almost never in 10 years, the numbers, I'm talking to the person in Japanese and I speak the numbers in Thai. And I don't even realize it until I see this person looking at me with a very confused face. And then I might even ask him in Japanese, "Kore wa nan desu ka?" or something like that. And he says, "I don't know, you said something, but I have no idea what you just said." And I go, "Oh my goodness." So it creates confusion. Both languages are like vying for that place in my brain that leads to words coming out of my mouth. So yes, learning is most likely almost always preceded by confusion. Connie Miller, did you raise your hand?
Yes. Also, it gets more intense. There's a place where the confusion is so kind of upsetting or anxiety producing, and I want to go away from it. I want to get rid of it. So forth. But if I persist and try and relax and slow down, as you've said, then the insight finds a way in.
Okay, good, excellent. And let me ask you to restate that from the beginning, but starting out, once again, as I was explaining with Ginny, instead of starting out with it, because I don't know who it is, where it is, or whatever,
Yes,
with some
yes,
form of I statement, please. Go ahead.
yes. So when I am upset about something or confused, I find myself to be very confused, and then I become almost irritable about it. And then I think, uh, the heck with this, I'm not gonna, it's too much for me, and I want to run away from it.
Okay,
But
okay, good, great.
oh,
And
from that feeling.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
want to
yeah,
run
yeah,
away
good, great,
from my
fantastic,
feeling of
fantastic.
frustration.
Yes. So you see, Connie, first of all, when you started the second time, you seemed, or at least in my hallucination, more thoughtful. And you started with I, which in my mind means self-responsibility.
Yes.
And then, because it's what we all do to some extent, you got to an it. And I don't know, Rob, I'm wondering, and this is a serious question. It's almost like it is a nominalization, but how do you consider it in NLP terms when someone talks about it is happening to me?
Isn't it more meta model stuff?
Yeah, I think there are two patterns, and I feel bad that I need to check the reference. One is called a loss performative,
Oh, wow, I haven't heard that one in a long time.
and one is called lack of referential index. Like, so one, you don't know what a process is acting on, and the other is you don't know who is doing the process. So it makes me mad. That may be that loss performative. Like it, what's the it, or who's the it? Something like that.
Okay,
I have something to
Words.
say.
How
No,
specific?
but I know I'm wondering, but Connie was in the middle of saying something also. So
yes. Okay, Connie.
Yes, this is fascinating to me because in the last few days, I've been thinking about this very thought about the use of the word it and how it doesn't, how thinking that way is not helpful. And I've been switching from it when I catch it myself doing that, trying, well, what am I talking about really?
Yes.
Oh, I love this conversation. I really appreciate your bringing it up.
Yeah, me too.
So,
And thank you, Rob, for those. I haven't heard those in a long time either. I took NLP in the late 80s, 90s.
yes. So, it's my experience, and I think it's certainly coaches that have an NLP background, pretty much 100% of the time, whenever I get a new client, they misdescribe what's going on for them.
Mm.
And it's in this misdescription of relationships and events and circumstances that the problem is developed and maintained. You see, again, for instance, if I say, my wife is driving me crazy, I mean, what the hell am I going to do? I got a screwed up wife. And chances are she'll be driving me crazy again tomorrow and the day after that. And as long as we live together, because that's the way she is. It's my wife's fault. I'm glad I finally understood that, you know. So in the process of a client describing to you what their challenge is, I prefer to call it a challenge rather than a problem, they will misdescribe it using all of the meta model terms. Not that people need to know the meta model, but they're nominalizing it. They're generalizing. I mean, living in Chiang Rai here, you'll hear guys talking about Thai woman. Oh, you know, Thai woman, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I have to be very careful if I get into a conversation like that, because I found that unless I'm very careful, I could easily annoy the person that I'm talking to, because I'm asking them to clarify, and oh my God, do they not want to clarify? Don't be picking away at me, damn it, you know? So, you know, Thai women are so blah, 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 and Thai women blah, 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 blah. And sometimes I wind up saying to guys who are just like complaining and complaining and complaining, and I say, for instance, excuse me, but you're British, aren't you? Yes. What about it? You know, I said, so you have a British passport then, is that correct? Yes. Then I'm wondering, why don't you just buy a plane ticket and return to the UK? Why are you living in Thailand since you find it so bloody annoying? Huh? You know, and that will usually be, that person never wants to talk to me again. So I don't say that unless I'm really somehow getting worked up myself, which I need to look at. But, you know, they're complaining, 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 and without self-responsibility.
Mhm.
And the longer you go on believing that it's everybody else's fault that I'm having this problem, well, you'll then have that problem for the rest of your life, chances are. Or simply, you know, there's a school of psychology, I'll call it, that talks about the imperative self. Imperative means something you have to do. You know, it's imperative that you don't do that anymore, or, you know. So the imperative self is our sense of self that is fully developed, I'd like to say, by the age of about 12 years old. So I believe maybe that I'm incapable, that I'm a little asshole, whatever, whatever, whatever. And I learn all of my emotional patterns from my caretakers. Most of us live in a family situation, so usually it's from our mother and father. And, you know, for instance, my father, who was a violent alcoholic for a number of years, when he'd start beating me, he would say, "You're no damn good and you'll never be any damn good." And guess what? Even though you guys all think I'm wonderful at this point in time, the first 35 years of my life or so, I tried to prove my father correct. That I'm no damn good and I'll never be any damn good. And I don't know, thank God I woke up one day and I said, "Charlie, my goodness, what are you doing to yourself?" And it takes, where was it? Some of the communist re-education camps. But I needed to go to a re-education camp for a while so that I could finally have some fairly positive thinking about myself. So I think anything that you believe about yourself that's not positively oriented is a piece of misinformation that you picked up, usually from a caregiver. Because I believe each and every one of us, we're intelligent, we're emotionally capable, we have the ability to live a satisfying life, to be in healthy relationships with people. And if there's any point in time when you start disbelieving that, it's most likely that you haven't been believing about yourself right from the very beginning because you learned some really negative thoughts from your caregivers. Okay. Who'd like to say something at this point in time? Yes.
I'll
Rob,
say something.
were you scratching your ear or did you want to say something? Yes.
All those are true. But what I was going to say is, you know, I'll need to chew on this "it" thing a bit more. You know, for me, the jury's still out is the expression. So, but what I would say is when I think some of the magic that happens from studying NLP is coincidental, a lucky accident. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. What I mean is, you know, we all came to a class tonight and Charlie said, you know, I would recommend that you pay attention when you say "it" and instead perhaps say "I." Great. Very much akin to many of the things we're taught in NLP, right? And I think what's happening there is that we start to bring more awareness to our speaking, to our perceiving. And through that, through paying attention, through slowing down, we may make some new discoveries.
Yeah,
So, I think there's a certain mindful awareness that has grown out of a lot of NLP. It's like, oh, do you have a picture? Are you aware of a picture? Are you aware of a voice? Or instead of saying relationship, what if you were to say the way in which I'm relating? All those things are prompts to get us to pay attention to our experience. And I think that can be incredibly generative.
yes, yeah, great. I'm right there with you. But I want to ask you a question or two.
About it.
Yes, is you see, I believe that whatever we say it is, it isn't. And that could even be
Sometimes, yeah.
the way I describe my girlfriend or my pet dachshund or whatever I say about that person or that animal, but that's not really who that person or animal is. And I believe the more we're able to slow down, and you notice I'm slowing down now, the more we're able to slow down, I always think it's the world changes immediately, but I know enough, I think, to know that I change immediately the moment that I start to slow down. So, if we may start with Rob, if he agrees to take part in this, I would ask you to take a deep breath and make any statement in the world that you want to make. Not a paragraph.
I'm really enjoying breathing.
Okay, great. Connie, any statement that you'd like to make?
Oh, we can't hear you, Connie.
I notice that I nurture all kinds of emotional habits.
You nurture what, please?
My emotional habits, ways of thinking about things. I keep them in order and almost fertilize them, make more of them than perhaps they are.
Nobody's
Yeah.
ever going to say it
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
So,
Mm,
Connie,
mm,
my thought with what you said, well, when you used the word fertilize, it changed my idea of what you were wanting to say. I thought, this is just my unusual way of thinking, so don't take it as any kind of fact, is that I thought you were using a very carefully crafted criticism of yourself when you were talking about nurturing your habits. Is that correct or not?
It's not a criticism. It's a noticing.
Okay. So you notice, see, because I was having trouble making understanding it. You're nurturing what, please?
I'm taking it back to what you said about the effect of the parents on us. And
Okay.
my mother always said to me, "Oh, Connie, you're so good."
Okay.
And that was, yeah. And that I didn't know how to deal with that because it was obviously not what she preferred. She wanted me to be bad, a bad girl like she was.
Wow, that's intense.
Mm.
That's why, you know,
That's intense. Let's all take a moment and absorb that a little bit because, okay, what it sounded like to me in my realm of my way of in the world, it's like my father, who was a violent alcoholic, was actually wanting me to also be a violent alcoholic.
ah. Yeah.
You know, and I'm just going to let that one percolate for me because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I've never thought of anything exactly like this before, and it might actually be true that if we have parents that have problematic life, there might just be some possibility that they want us to live our life in a similarly problematic way. And you're saying, okay, wow, so I kind of got what you were saying then. Is that what this thumbs up means?
Yes, well, in my mother's case, I would say I have uh, observed and listened and studied a little bit narcissism uh, because she so often would want us to be like her, have the same taste she has. She, sort of in a controlling way.
Okay.
So I think that's part of the story.
Yeah. Interesting. Anybody else want to remark on that? I think it's quite fascinating. This is like a new area for me. Anyone want to remark at all? Okay. Um, my father was a New York City fireman, and what an interesting career he had, because I just give you one small piece of information. He was the New York City fireman responsible for certifying the World Trade Center buildings to be habitable. So, for instance, what was the World Trade Centers were above 100 floors, I think, right? Something like that. He was riding up and down on construction elevators, meaning open air elevators with just like piping around you, going up to the bloody 100th floor. There's no way that anybody was going to ever get me to do that, you know? So he was, and my father was known to be one of the biggest heroes in the New York City Fire Department. This is before 9/11, of course. And I mean, I would often meet men, could even be in a bar or whatever, and everybody would always say, your father is the biggest hero in the New York City Fire Department. Okay? So I'm saying all of that not because I'm trying to show off about my father. My father had a very deep-seated belief that he was I'm trying to think of the right word. He was a wuss. That's an old-fashioned word, maybe. He was a guy that couldn't stand up to anything, and he was hiding his whole life. And I didn't find that out about that being his belief until a couple of weeks before he was dying, and I was attending to him. He believed, a coward, okay, he believed that he wasn't the biggest hero in the New York City Fire Department. He believed that he was the biggest coward in life. And part of what he tried to do with me through beating me, which is not a great way to teach anybody anything, he was trying to get me to be like a hero kind of guy who could stand up for himself and or stand up for the needy. But unfortunately, he did that by beating me, which wasn't a great way to train me. So yeah, I think there are ways that our caregivers actually teach us the opposite of what they might really want to teach us. If they themselves were more capable of having a more realistic and, I don't know, even say quote unquote accurate appraisal of themselves. Yes, Brenda.
I think it's even subtler than that. I'm a mom, and when my son was, I don't know, not even a year old, and he would stand up in the bathtub. This one day, stood up in the bathtub playing with his toys, and I gave him a little patch on his tush, and I said, "No standing in the bathtub." And he whimpered and he sat back down. And the next night, he did it again. He stood up and I gave him a patch, "No standing in the bathtub." And the third night, he did it again. He stood up. And when I went to get closer, he went like this, like, "I got this, Ma." And he punched himself. And he said, "No, Danny, in bathtub." And in that moment, I realized I was not teaching him safety. I was teaching him to hit himself.
He was teaching him to what, please?
I was teaching him to hit himself,
I don't get that one word.
to
He's
punch
teaching him to
himself.
hit himself.
Oh, okay. Yes.
No, my intention was to teach him safety, but I saw when he went, "I got this," and gave himself a hit, that I was actually teaching him to hit himself. So I
A
think
brilliant
these,
kid.
yes, they're much subtler than we think, and they're definitely not conscious.
Yes.
Just as a side note, Charlie, a friend of mine who's an author, Brian McDonald, just wrote not long ago a book about 5 generations in the fire department. You might like the book. It's called 5 Floors Up, about the Feehan generations of up to
Okay.
9/11.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, so you've heard me talking about my father today, and because of, I mean, he did stop drinking at one point because my mother said, "You either stop and you stop today, or I'm out of here and I'm taking the kids with me." And somehow he got it. And so I told you he was the fireman responsible for certifying the World Trade Centers. So when 9/11 happened, my father was long retired, and he was retired because he got seriously injured on the job going in to try to save someone's life, and he fell through a floor from, like, I don't know, the 10th floor down to the 9th floor, and really he did damage to his right knee that was never really fixable. when 9/11 happened, my father cried and cried and cried and cried. Um, and he wondered, as people have guilt, he actually said this in a moment of, I don't think he quite understood it when he said it. He said, maybe I should have never certified those goddamn buildings. Those assholes couldn't have destroyed them if I had never certified them. They would have been torn down. Better, they would have been torn down by the housing department in New York City than bombed by those assholes and all of those lives lost. So holy mackerel. There he was, 9/11, feeling that to some extent it was his fault. And I think with certain people who have enough, I don't know, I'll call it trauma for want of a better term, in their life, they can make most anything that happens their fault. So, yes, Rob.
You know, I'm sort of thinking about a couple of themes that we've been talking about tonight. You know, I would say one of the themes is some of the things that we do to feel okay, right? Like we might drink to feel okay, or drink to numb.
Yes.
You know, you talked about a couple of examples. Certainly, your father, your experience, your buddy Fred, who takes pain medication.
Yes.
And it's easy to say, like, oh, you know, Fred's doing that because of something else. That seems pretty straightforward, right? Seems obvious from the outside. I think it's really useful to, instead of jumping to whatever circumstance Fred is struggling with, I think it's useful to ask, what is the thing actually doing? You know, is what Fred is needing right now is to numb himself or to forget?
Okay.
I think if I understand that first, then I might actually be able to have a conversation with Fred about it.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's just another stick. Like,
okay.
Oh, you're doing this. You know.
So I always very much value what you say. Start again,
Except
because
now.
I got a little lost there.
Okay.
So here's Fred saying, don't touch me. Nobody can ever help this back and blah, blah, blah. And you're suggesting what, please?
By the way, I'm suggesting that what you did was perfect, and you know, it's not a therapeutic relationship, and blah blah blah, right? I guess what I think there are two things we can notice. One is Fred is taking the pain medication, perhaps to avoid something else, perhaps.
Okay.
Right. But I think really inquiring about what is the pain medication doing? Oh, it's allowing him to not think about that, or it's allowing him to feel good for a moment, or feel carefree. And I think when I get curious about that, that might be a starting point. Yeah. Well.
Yeah, can I say something? I just want to respond to Rob, Charlie. You know, you made a great point, because I worked in the substance abuse field, and most likely Fred is addicted to oxycodone, which is similar to heroin.
Right.
And he found this, it's like Charlie described it well also, because from the clients that I had, in detox, it was like they said it was became a love that they couldn't let go of. But you made a great point, because in order to depart from that great love, they need to find the reason why they gravitated to it. There was a missing piece that, that they became addicted to it. That piece of something, whatever it was missing in their life. And they found their love. That's what they would describe to me. That was their new love. The oxycodone, when that became too expensive than heroin, but it started with, like you said, something was there that needed to be addressed.
Yeah. Okay, so here's where I am with this particular part of our conversation today so far, and it's all good, is what I need to be careful of pretty much all of the time, and I say that attempting to be as honest as possible, is that I don't use Fred's current condition or way of doing things as a way of being judgmental about him. In other words, if Fred was as cool as I am, he wouldn't be taking this damn pain medication. You know, and
Right, until we find a better choice for Fred that's convincing to Fred, we may be taking away his what he feels is his lifeline. Even though we know from the outside it's just a security blanket.
Self-diagnosed.
That is great, because there were people that found that new lifeline, or that knew something more that made them feel more powerful. Thank you.
So this is all great. And I don't want to just all of a sudden make an overarching statement and going, well, I figured the whole thing out as usual. But I want to tell you that this still happens for me in and out, meaning sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. And I'm just slowing down to make sure that I'm not just talking nonsense here, is as much as I've been addicted to medicating myself with alcohol during the course of my life, and I pause, letting that sink into me. Lately, I have this, and it's a very new feeling for me. It's a great new feeling for me. I've been sitting somewhere, like where I'm sitting in a local bar, but I went in, it's a restaurant bar, and I went in for the restaurant. And I haven't had any drink. And I watching the usual drinkers having their third pint of Guinness or whatever. And I've had this emotional responses, with the way I would call it. And I said, like in disbelief, holy mackerel, I feel so much better not drinking than if I would be drinking right now. This is, wow, what a fantastic realization. I'm not drinking. Also, I'm not smoking anymore. I mean, I had my throat cancer a few years ago. I'm not smoking. I'm not drinking. Someone might say, Jesus, life must be awful boring right now. But I'm not smoking. I'm not drinking. And I developed a process to give to give up cigarettes, and I developed it on my own, and I had no struggle giving up cigarettes finally after struggling for years. Boy, have I not wanted a cigarette. And in fact, I had already given up cigarettes for 2 years before I was diagnosed with cancer. And the medical people tell me you have to be free from cigarettes at least 5 years before it really, you can count on the fact that maybe, you're not going to wind up with cancer. But I realized I'm just sitting here looking around. It's a nice enough day outside. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm not drinking. Wow, I feel so much better not drinking. And when I've had that realization recently, more than once, I realized very thankfully just how much I've shifted in the course of my life. Because, I'm purposely, playfully looking around like this. I'm capable of being much more aware when I'm not drinking. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about when I'm so drunk, blah, 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 blah. No, just not drinking at all. I'm more aware, I'm more alive. I'm more present. And guess what? Being alive and present is wonderful. So I've lost a large part of my need to medicate myself. Okay. There's Brenda came back again. Yes. So
I'm sorry, I may have to run off and,
yeah, we're going to end in about 2 minutes.
oh, good.
Okay.
Thank you for tonight, everybody. It was so great. And I just want to say thank you for bringing up the NLP and all those terms, because it just brought me back to my teacher in the 90s who was just like you, Charlie and Rob. And I kind of want to listen to some of his audios because I have to transpose them one day, but he just had a way of calming you down. And tonight's class really brought that to light, how we have to just be present and calm ourselves down. And I got to practice it
Yeah.
till we see each other again. Thank you. Thank
So
you.
good. So here's the deal, particularly for Connie and Brenda, because, less experience with me, is first of all, I consider everybody that attends these classes potentially teachers to the rest of us. And certainly with Rob, who I have a long friendship and history with in a positive way. When I say history, it might sound, I'm always very happy to have him share any of his ideas, his opinions, his learning. So also Brenda, Connie, because this is how we really make it happen. We learn from each other. And, for years, because I started studying NLP, I think it was 40 years ago. I used to think that I was the smartest guy in the room. And I think that's fairly common for some NLP style people. And then it was quite a wonderful awakening when I realized I wasn't the smartest guy in the room. So not to go on and on because Brenda needs to leave, but I invite
You
all
can
of
go
you.
on and I can leave. It's okay.
Every class, I'm going with the flow of energy in the room. And I certainly know how to do a number of exercises. I call them exercises rather than techniques. And I've got an arsenal like a lot of other people. But sometimes we don't need that to get the most out of the class. So I've learned something today. Hopefully everyone's learned a little bit of something. I'll be teaching another class in 2 weeks' time, which I'll send you an announcement about. And if you've enjoyed today, and if you have any other friends, or even if they're not friends, maybe it's people you don't like. If you have any people that you don't like, that you might want to suggest this class to them.
Do that this time. I'm sorry, I've been a little lax with that, Charlie. I will.
Thank you, Charlie.
I
Yes.
will.
Rob,
Brenda.
Brenda, Connie.
Thank you,
I'm
everybody.
gonna invite Fred.
Okay, yes. And Fred, I'm considering, well, I'm not charging for these classes. If I was charging for these classes, I would feel like I'd have to give some small amount of what I'm making to Fred.
Fred, right, yeah.
Okay, so
Well, good seeing
please all of
everyone.
us and have a happy holidays, I guess we need to say, to take in the different religions in the world.
Yeah,
Okay, blessings to
good seeing
everyone.
everyone.
You
Thank you.
too. Thank you
Right.
so much.
Okay,
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
thank you.
Beautiful
Thanks.
gathering.
Okay.
Beautiful.